So, hi, Arrowhead Guys. We're here with Seth Keysor of The Athletic. Uh, I know his office looks a little different. There's a lot less snow in this room. He must have redecorated. Uh, Last time we saw him, he was making a feature appearance in Bob Sutton's hit track, I Love You, Seth. Can you show us that dance move? Wonderful.
I had somehow the same amount of neck in that video that I have in real life. And
Oh, that's
so,
all right. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I might have one under here somewhere.
yeah. Well, see, that's the ticket. You actual men can grow a beard. And that's the whole reason I've realized to grow facial hair is as you get older, things happen. My 12-year-old son, he came when to my office, and he looked at a picture of Jazz and myself on our wedding day, and I was 22. I weighed a buck 70. And he's looking at that, and then he kind of looks at me, and this is like last year, and he goes, "Dad, your neck used to be longer." And I go, "That is not what happened, son. That I assure you, my neck is the same length."
Yeah, I get the pleasure of telling people that haven't seen me in a while, what happened? You're bald and you have a beard. And I said, yeah, well, you get to a certain age and it just starts falling through your head and comes out the bottom.
So
So,
yeah. When puberty hits and this thing sprouts, I'm gonna definitely be covering up my lack of neck. But yeah, life is good. How you doing, man?
oh, I'm doing great, man. I think everyone heard about your emergency surgery. Want to give everyone a quick update on how you're doing?
Absolutely. I'm doing well. Sorry, I've got my Jesus Saves Bro shirt on. I was preaching today, and I like to break the mold of what the congregation expects, like a suit and tie, and I show up in a t-shirt that says Jesus Saves Bro. I like it. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, I actually forgot I was wearing that until I looked at that. I'm like, oh yeah, it says Jesus that saves, bro. Anyway, I'm feeling a lot more like myself. Even just a couple days ago, I was struggling pretty hard. Man, getting your appendix, the whole man, appendicitis hurts. Like, and I've been told it varies person to person. Some people, it's not that bad. They caught it early enough or whatever. And some people are like, yeah, it was awful. But then they put me on the painkiller and my worries floated away. But I'm doing a lot better now. I'm hoping to make it to the divisional round game. So we'll see whether or not that's in the cards for me.
Excellent. Um, so we're here at the end of the regular season. The playoffs are in the future. What are your thoughts on the regular season for the 2018 Chiefs?
Great season, all time season. I have not had that much fun watching a Chiefs season ever. Especially since I started doing this as a job. And Nate Taylor, my colleague at the Athletic, who covers the Chiefs as well, we've talked so much about how blessed we feel that the year that we started working for the Athletic covering the Chiefs, it's just there's always so much to write about. It's so much fun. You get so many historical things happening, and we just got to witness one of the best five offenses in history, and we got to watch it week in and week out. We got to watch plays that most fan bases go a month without seeing him. And so it's just a great, great, great season. Obviously, the hope is that it'll continue. And I won't be thrilled with an early quote unquote playoff exit, with no wins. I won't be thrilled with that. But I think a lot of people looked at this as, 2018 is lay the foundation, get Mahomes some experience, and then splurge again in free agency and compete in 2019. That's what everyone thought was going to happen. And instead, we got treated to what we've been treated to. And I hope fans haven't missed that with all the frustration about the defense and everything. It's a great season.
I know I haven't certainly missed that. I'm drinking the red Kool-Aid too.
Well, here, I'll have my Plexus lean while you do that.
It's delicious. So we all know you're a busy guy. You got a multitude of kids and probably just some new jobs. Are there any players that have stuck out to you this season that you just haven't had a chance to get to yet?
There are a bunch of them. Someone could ask me that, and I'd probably come up with a different answer every time. One player I'm really looking forward to reviewing in more detail. I've only reviewed him after a couple games. Is Derek Nottie. I would like to see him on the field a little bit more. You can see the difference in the quality of the run defense up the middle, depending on whether he's in the game or not. He's been very stout overall. And I'm really interested in how he does. I want to review Breland Speaks rather than just anecdotally. I want to actually chart wins and losses and neutrals. And these are all things, that I won't get around till the offseason, because Speaks started off so bad. He was so bad. And
You
he's
could say
actually,
he started off slow.
yes. Yeah, and he's remained slow. But he seems to he's at least helped a little. Fair enough. The entire offensive line, I'd like to review more of, because those are just things that, in reviewing Mahomes as much as I have and trying to cover, every week I do the big film review that includes Mahomes' big stuff, and I've added to that this year, which my editor pushed me into it, and I hated the idea, and now I love it. Like, adding like 8 or 9 tidbits from film. And in doing all that, you can't quite go as in depth. And so the offensive line is a big one for me. And so but Derek Nottie especially, and I really want to look at the entirety of Dorian O'Daniel's work too.
Okay. So I think enough has been said about this offense this year with the records they've broken and the outstanding performance of Patrick Mahomes. But recently you had an article that you put out on the defense actually being pretty dang good at home. Would you like to
Right.
expand on that a little bit?
I would. It's been a lot of fun just because of the amount of controversy it created. I was basically looking at not whether the defense is good or bad, but whether or not there's an advantage to playing at Arrowhead. Because I think we as a fan base are so tortured and shell-shocked from a couple of recent bad losses at Arrowhead. One of which I was at. The other one I watched slowly unfold. The Tennessee Titans one, just awful. I think you were at that one, or
I
you
was
were.
there. Yeah.
Were you at the Steelers one too?
I was there.
Yeah, and with the Steelers one, I mean, the building was electric, man. Like it was so ready. And from what I've heard about the Titans one, you could almost feel the hesitation in the air a little bit more. Then they started off so great, and then the moment things started to turn south, the nervous energy in the building. And so that's tough because, I mean, that could have an effect for sure on players. Maybe it makes them tighten up too. But anyway, I wanted to write about, how have they been better at home than on the road? So I looked at the last 3 seasons, especially this season, and I looked at how did the Chiefs defense do against their opponents in comparison to what those opponents averaged. Because the big thing everyone says is, they played better teams on the road. Absolutely true. But my goal is to find out, are they holding teams below their average or allowing them above their average? Because that way you can isolate for quality of opponent. What I found is at home, they are holding quarterbacks below their normal passer rating by about 10 points. They're holding them to about 0.2 or 0.3 fewer yards per play, which doesn't sound like a lot, but over the course of a game, that's actually that's multiple first downs. It's actually quite significant. They're also holding teams about 3 or 4 points lower than they average. Okay, so compared to what the teams they played at home normally did, they've done better. On the road, complete opposite. They allow 9 extra points per game to what teams average. They allowed a passer rating that's an extra 10 points above what they normally do, and they allow like 0.3 or 0.4 more yards per play. And so it's kind of a night and day thing. At home, they were decent. On the road, they were horrific. And so that was the finding that I made. And it's been funny watching people kind of dispute that a little bit. Me and Seren Petro got into it a little bit over Twitter, which is fun. Yeah, I respect Seren a great deal. But, the defense is terrible. It's like, I'm not saying it's not terrible. I'm just saying it's better at home.
Right. And I think, 18 points a game at home this year?
Yep. And 34 on the road.
34 on the road. That's a pretty insane split stat there.
Absolutely. And even when you account for the averages of the 2 different types of opponents, there's still a 12-point swing.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
And that's a huge swing. That's the difference between the Chiefs offense and the Giants offense.
Right. So one of the things I've actually been looking into is an interesting stat I found on points that came after 4th down. I went through the play-by-play drives and found that the Chiefs have given up 77 points this year after a 4th down was converted by the offense in a pressure situation. Basically to say that the offense has indeed been pressuring the defense into situations that allow them to elevate the score on us.
So what you're saying is opposing teams have scored 77 points in situations where they went for it on 4th down and converted?
and converted it, which led to points.
That's a crap load of points.
That's a lot of points. It comes
That
out to
is
that's 5 points a game.
5 points a game. See, and that's definitely huge. And I can picture some of the games where that happened. And I suppose, I mean, against the Chargers alone a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, the last 2 drives against the Chargers, exactly.
Yep.
They both had fourth down calls, and I don't know if anyone else at home has one of these, but this could have come in handy.
Yeah, those fourth downs, those were infuriating. I
But
do think there's definitely some merit to the idea that, and I think you saw it against Cleveland especially,
yeah,
but you've seen it against other teams too late in games. If you have a high scoring offense that's scoring a lot late in games, teams are going to go for it more on fourth down. They are going to be more aggressive. They're going to go for 2 more. And that definitely is going to put your defense in a do or die situation more often. So I think it's kind of a split there. Like, I do think you can see how the offense makes life a little tougher on the defense in that regard. And then unfortunately, the defense chose to die rather than do.
right. And it is interesting you mentioned the Browns and the Chargers games, because in both those games, the opponent scored the majority of their points after converting a fourth down. So
God,
with the
that's
Browns, it
gross.
was 14 out of 21, and with the Chargers, the second game was 15 out of 29 points was actually scored after converting a fourth down.
That's so disgusting.
Yeah,
That just makes me sick. Those last 2 drives were really tough to watch because, you know, the offense had eaten up a bunch of clock on its second to last drive, had scored a touchdown. They went up 14. And to me, it's like all the defense needed to do was just hold up on one drive, and not even hold up, you know, wonderfully. You know, hold them to a field goal, do something, make it a little bit slower, and they just couldn't do it. And then, of course, the offense had that really rough drive, which is kind of funny. Everyone says, well, they should have been running the ball. Well, they did run the ball in the first play, and they lost 3 yards. Then they had a 5-yard gain where the ball was in bounds to Tyreek Hill, which kept the clock running. Then they had a false start, and on 3rd and 13, you have to pass the ball. And even if they hadn't, here's the funny thing: Mahomes was sacked, and that kept the clock running anyway.
right.
So it's one of those interesting things. I had a discussion with someone over Twitter about this where I could not get him to understand, like, and it's the lack of getting the first down that hurt them. But it's tough. It's definitely tough.
And I think that as much as I'm sure people are sick of talking about Kareem Hunt, I think that's where you really see his presence missed, is when you need to run that clock out and the other team knows you're going to run.
Mm-hmm.
And the players we have, I think, in a balanced offense are sufficient to churn up some yards. But in that pressure situation, game on the line, where you have to pick up that first down, keep the clock moving, and the other team knows you're going to run, I just see a few deficiencies with those guys knowing how to get those extra yards.
I definitely agree with that, especially with Ware injured. I don't think that's necessarily Damian Williams' role. I think if Ware is healthy, I think you see some differences at the end of that Chargers game. Now, to be fair, you know, that one run, which made so much of a difference on that, you know, it looked like they were attempting an outside zone. And when outside zone fails, it fails big time. And that's just tough because, you know, Hunt used to, but the difference between, you know, Damian Williams got tackled for a 3-yard loss. Hunt would get tackled for like a 1 or 2 yard gain.
Right.
There's a huge difference there. And I think Ware probably would have been maybe gotten back to the line of scrimmage at least. So there's definitely something to be said. I personally, I subscribe to the theory that they've missed Hunt, but not even as much as they've missed Watkins.
I think that's probably a fair point.
But you can't lose a player. Kareem Hunt is probably one of the best 2 or 3 runners in the NFL. You can't lose a player of that caliber without hurting everything else.
Agreed. So at this point in time, we know that the Chiefs are going to be facing off against the Colts next week in the divisional round of the playoffs. We briefly spoke about this yesterday. I know the Colts was kind of a team you were looking forward to exercise some of those demons. Tell me about the matchup.
You know, I'm really happy with the way things have played out. The Colts beat up on a very flawed Texans team that, you know, people are talking, wow, their defense is so much better than the Chiefs. They are better than the Chiefs, make no mistake, but their pass rush isn't better. At least it hasn't been all year. And one thing that I saw watching that game, there's 2 things. I'm going to be writing on this, and by the time this actually hits, it might actually be up on The Athletic. The Colts played a ton of cover 2 zone. I hope they play that on Saturday because Mahomes has shredded that. I mean, you know, if you go back and watch what they did to the Steelers in week 2, a lot of that was cover 2. If you go back and look at a bunch of the big plays that have been made throughout the season, it's been against cover 2 zones. The stuff that's given them trouble is really good man coverage with single high safeties favoring Hill's side of the field. That's what's given them trouble. And then a variety of, well, I don't want to get too into it, but certain types of cover 1 and cover 3 have given them trouble. Cover 2 and with zone underneath, Kelsey has been eating that up. I hope they do that. And hey, who knows, right? It's football.
Yeah, but the Colts are notoriously bad for covering tight ends. I think if they go out and they run their defense against us, Kelsey is going to have a huge day.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's not just Kelsey too. I think he'd have a huge day, but I mean, Hill eats up cover 2 as well because he's able to find those same openings. I just think you could see, depending on what they do, you could genuinely see a week 2 against Pittsburgh style, just unbelievable offensive explosion from the Chiefs. So I the on that side of the ball, what they did, they blanked the Texans for a while. Deshaun Watson played very badly. Now, hey, maybe that's because the Colts were playing so well. But what I saw were a bunch of missed throws. And I think Watson is a brilliant young quarterback. I think he and Mahomes and Baker Mayfield and Andrew Luck and a few other quarterbacks, I think they're going to own the league in a few years. But he was misfiring. He just was. And after Hopkins got a little banged up and he didn't quite have all of his speed, they just didn't have any other weapons. The Chiefs are a significantly better offense. As far as stopping the Colts, they're extremely well coached. Andrew Luck can play. But what was interesting watching them against the Texans is that Luck made some good plays, but overall he was mostly a game manager. He played a lot more like Alex Smith than Patrick Mahomes. Now, make no mistake, Luck has a much bigger arm. And he can make plays all on his own. He's done it his whole career outside of structure. So I'm not necessarily comparing him as a player to Alex because they're very different. But in this system, with the really, really good head coach OC that they have, he played more the role of facilitator with a really great offensive line. And so if the Chiefs want to not get run over, they are going to need to get some pressure because the Texans Luck was just standing back there kind of like, and, they can't play it like that. And so it'll be really interesting to see how it goes. The last time the Chiefs played an offensive line that was playing this well was the Rams. And they were able to get a lot of pressure there. And Goff just kept delivering despite it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes.
I'll be interested because Reich is a disciple. He came from Doug Peterson, correct?
I think so. You know what? I don't know. I think he came from Peterson because, he came over from the Eagles.
Right.
Yes.
So he's almost by default part of the Andy Reid, third of the NFL coaching tree. So
absolutely,
it makes you wonder with that experience.
And some of it looked familiar.
2013 Chiefs is exactly what I was thinking of when you were describing it. So it kind of makes me wonder if that's a decided advantage for Andy Reid being the master of that system.
And it could well be. I think when you watch them on the field, some of not the sets, because their sets are very different. They don't have the talent the Chiefs have on offense in terms of playmakers, etc. But some of the route concepts and combinations, at least as far as I could tell on the broadcast, looked similar. In some of the rub routes and the way they were getting guys open, looked familiar, even to stuff that we see from Andy now. And so I think that'll be interesting to watch. One really interesting thing that's going to come into play, at least for me, having watched a little bit of the wild card games, they are really letting secondaries play more in the playoffs. They're letting them be more grabby. They're letting them be more physical. That plays perfectly into the Chiefs because the Chiefs have shown, they're the most penalized secondary in the league. If you let Skandrick, because who knows what they're going to do with Skandrick, but I'll tell you what, if they're going to let him play that physical, I say you play Skandrick. That gives Steven Nelson a huge advantage because that's how he plays. Charvarius Ward gives him an advantage because that's how he plays too. The only one who's not super grabby is Fuller, and he's pretty grabby too. And so that's something to look out for. The type of officiating is going to play a huge role, just like it did in the Rams game. Early on, the Chiefs got called for 3 or 4 penalties right out of the gate, and that changed the way they had to cover all game, and we saw what happened there. If they let them be physical, that's a much, much, much better outcome for the Chiefs because their secondary really relies on it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what reffing crew we get, which is not something any fan should ever have to say. So thank you very much for your time, Seth. I know you got a lot going on, so I'll let you get back to it. Just want to thank you for joining us. It's Seth Keysor again from The Athletic. If you're not a member yet, check him out. Otherwise, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see him here.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Always a pleasure, Seth. Thank you again.